Hi class. So for my social justice presentation, I'm going to be speaking on relevance towards my fieldwork, and I will be addressing autism, ASD, and then autism awareness. Autism calls for a need for change in the interaction with our special needs youth, with our social justice system, those that are employed in the social justice system, and calls for an increase in policy reform within the police force. So with this presentation, I will address social issues that have occurred over the past few years with special needs children, specifically autism children, and what can we do to make our social justice system better when interacting with these youth. First, to get right into it, let's address the issues that affect hundreds of people that fall under the DSM-5, including autism spectrum disorders. In the height of an era of police reform that we've witnessed in the past year and this year, including 2020 to 2021, and social justice, autism spectrum disorder and involvement of the criminal justice system needs to be addressed as well. ASD youth in communities who have been criminalized due to their symptoms and the lack of understanding and knowledge of treatment are victims of injustice. Many of these youth fall victim to simply lack of understanding and police failure to acknowledge signs of ASD and lack of proper training from the police force. Police find it difficult in communicating while in the public with somebody who may have a more severe form of ASD, and their behavior tends to be viewed as suspicious or harmful to others and the police. And this results in severe reactions from the fear of the police that they are presented with when encountering law enforcement and or involvement in any criminal activity. These youth are subjected and criminalized because of their behaviors, and police over the years have not handled situations properly and have overly criminalized these youth based on their reactions in a high stress situation. So in result of lack of proper training from the police force, these individuals fall victim to the justice system and are treated improperly by untrained force, men and women who encounter individuals with ASD and other DSM-V spectrum disorders. There needs to be an increase in awareness and an increase in training with law enforcement when encountering individuals who have ASD and other special needs. Special needs children and our youth are at an increased risk of being detained in the back of a police wagon or seated in a courtroom at the defendant's table. This was a quote from Autism Parenting magazine. Now, why is this the case? As I stated before, many people with severe cases of ASD and other special needs react and have behaviors that are seen as abnormal to the general public, and the police force who encounter them when a high stress situation do not know how to properly calm a child or a youth, and a situation ends up escalating into a situation that becomes more severe than when it started and where the police was called for. So special needs youth and ASD children end up, like the statement says, a lot of them end up being put in the back of a police wagon just for simply having a reaction or an outburst to a high stress situation. And instead of having the proper staff employee who knows how to calm or handle a situation and interact properly with these youth, they end up detaining them and putting them in a criminalization situation. So as you all may already know, I work at the Hebrew Educational Society, and I specifically work in the special needs department. So as HES youth members that are in our special needs department do fall risk of becoming criminalized when encountering the police. Like many of the youth here at HES, individuals with ASD have difficulty with communicating, difficulty in social interactions, and have an increased imagination or lowered imagination. They also have sensory sensitivity, such as reactions or odd behaviors when hearing sharp noises. I know, for instance, my first severe reaction with one of our older children, who became very sensitive to a loud pitch noise due to construction outside a building, ended up screaming for almost 2 hours. And it's not that she was acting out or an outburst, she was having a severe sensitivity reaction towards the construction. And when put in a situation in the general public or in an encounter with a police officer, a situation where we have trained staff that know how to calm a youth when they react and behave in this way, this situation could have been escalated, and because they don't know how to calm them, they end up becoming criminalized. Due to their sensitivity, what is seen as unusual behavior from those who are unfamiliar with the responses, negative attention may be drawn toward them, causing disturbances to the individual and those in the environment. Their reaction to behaviors when under distress may spark in the general public as fear, which also causes the general public to call the police on them because of the behavior being seen as abnormal, and people become fearful. This can increase distress in the individual when the individual who has ASD is not approached the correct way and has the appropriate trained individual to help them through their sensitive outburst. There are some typical offenses that ASD youth and teens has had over the past few years, and it's due to a child's lack of empathy, dysregulation, over curiosity, and outburst with things that are unfamiliar to them. And there are common offenses which include harassment, stalking, sexual assault, pornography, verbally violence. So these are offenses that are called on to ASD youth and teens when their behaviors, as I stated, are seen as unusual or unlawful, but because of their symptoms of lack of empathy and dysregulation, they don't comprehend it as an offense. It's just their way of interacting without understanding how that affects someone else. So I found this one case example that was very significant to me and this social justice presentation. In 2017, a 10-year-old boy with autism was arrested in Florida due to an altercation where he punched and kicked his teacher. According to CNN reporter Jacqueline Howard, the boy refused to listen to the teacher. Although the teacher gave him an opportunity to change his behavior, he continued to act out. The boy ended up being arrested and suspended from school, where the interaction was flawed with the police force and the school officials was that the mother was not involved when this encounter occurred. The mother was never informed that the boy had a warrant put out for his arrest by the school because of several reports of him becoming violent. And due to his severity of his special needs symptoms, this was a lack of care and proper reporting for the school officials, and a lack of proper policy by the policeman of arresting a young child without notifying the mother. The autistic boy, who was 10 years old, was arrested due to his physical outbursts, and his mother was indeed not informed. Another second case that struck me in my research was a case in 2015 where the New York Police Department officers had beat and injured a young black autistic teen named Troy Canales who was sitting outside his home, according to the lawsuit. In 2017, Ms. Torres called for an ambulance when her autistic son was having a meltdown. Instead, 2 officers arrived and ended up kneeling on the 10-year-old boy's body and handcuffed him. In 2018, a school resource officer handcuffed and restrained and taunted a 7-year-old autistic boy who was agitated after switching to a new medication. These are clear examples of not only lack of training and proper policy, but lack of simple human care from the police force. I mentioned about police reform being at its peak in the past 2020, based on racial injustice. There's a plethora of other injustice examples, especially when it comes to people that are perceived as not normal or unlike the normal. Autistic children are being beaten and arrested for no reason of any criminal activity by the police force. Some of the children who have more severe symptoms of ASD at HES, different procedures are followed to calm them down and de-escalate a situation. Outbursts can be challenging, and even the most trained staff with psychological disorder will sometimes have difficulty calming a child. Some school staff members can find themselves in a situation like the teacher in the previous case, where they are incapable of calming the child and, in result, call the police. Enticed with feelings of inability to control a child and the need to involve the police out of fear. Putting a child in handcuffs can cause a child and will cause the child more harm to their mental state. It will have a harmful impact in their future and entice fear when they encounter police again. Like the 2 young 10-year-olds, and specifically 10-year-old John, who I mentioned in previous cases. Assessment of the issue. While working closely with the head of the special needs department of HES and the staff youth counselors that I work with every day during my weekly counseling sessions and my other 2 groups, I interviewed the staff on their thoughts on this pertinent issue. Common concern for a lot of the counselors who have some experience working with ASD and special needs children that are on the more severe scale, and some who have this as their first job at HES working with special needs children, was their common concern was that calming a child down when he or she is having an outburst is difficult and communication is not easy. When asked if they feel that police will properly handle an ASD child's outburst under high stress circumstances, many of them responded no. Further research found reports of cases in which police involvement and the arresting of an ASD child further corroborated a need to bring awareness to the issue and a need for social change and a change in the protocol on handling individuals in mental health within the police department. Two specific laws and protections that I found in my research. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Act, outlines what all states must do to meet the needs of students with disabilities. Students who fall under this act must have a disability that adversely affects their educational performance. Second, the Senate Bill S6859 in 2021 enforced training police officers on how to respond to situations involving individuals with autism spectrum disorder and other developmental disabilities, found on the New York State Senate website. So, who was involved in my in-person research? As I mentioned before, I work very closely with the special needs director at HES, and I work every day alongside each child's counselor. Within the special needs department, each child is given one counselor who is there with them throughout the day, that directs them to the activities, is there to help them while they're doing their activities and with any needs that they may need during their time at HES. Based on their thoughts and opinions, I advise that the best strategy to combat this social injustice would be an awareness strategy. It is the most plausible form of action to pursue change within the police system. Bringing awareness to improper and lack of training or pushing for the use of referrals to the appropriate service workers that are trained with special needs to be brought to the scenes when police are involved if a scene has escalated, and to defer the potential of arresting a child who they can't seem to calm down. Other recommendations for change, along with an increase in police training, protocol changes also need to be made. When a child is under distress and police are notified, a parent must be on scene, and a psychological expert should be brought to lend further assistance in a pending psychological or behavioral issue. A psychologist should be present, or a social worker who is involved or is already on a case with the child, and they must be present at the scene to properly install strategies that are designed to de-escalate a child from an emotional outburst. School officials should also have required continued training with identifying and de-escalating a child from a tantrum or emotional outburst, especially with special needs children, and always involve parents in all incidents at school. A child should not be placed in handcuffs from a school without the presence of a parent or the acknowledgement of a parent on scene after all necessary measures have been taken to calm and remove harm from the child and those around them. Actions to ensure that this strategy for change takes place. Implementing change reform in the social justice system is strongly based on raising awareness and fighting for increased protocols. Present ASU training and tools for all school officials, and ensure that not just school officials have required training yearly, but also policemen and women. They must have continuous training and required recertification when working directly with children with ASD and other special needs. In my research on our course page, by looking through the Heights, I did find a vast amount of services and centers that the Heights already has, but they do seem to be missing a community youth center like the one at my agency, HES, to support children to support child development and child safety. Youth centers are vital for the educational nourishment and development of young children, teens, and young adults. Parents of the children also greatly benefit from having the extra incentive to their child's social and physical wellness, while being offered a plethora of other services like social services, sports, camps, employment opportunities, gyms, and food pantries. Youth centers offer a lot of services in a one package deal that I believe would be a great addition to the Heights. Many of the other services and centers that are already in the Heights are available within my community in Brooklyn. I thank you guys for watching my presentation, and I do look forward to reading all of your responses and comments, and I look forward to seeing the rest of you guys' presentations for this week as well. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Thank you.